I'm here today to talk to you guys about the future of digital assets and digital ownership rights. Now, before I really get into my presentation, I kind of want to address something. So it seems like there's sort of this sentiment in the crypto space that digital assets or NFTs or a lot of these tokens are just cute, cat pictures on the internet. Funny enough, it seems as if the internet sort of gets its root from cute cat pictures. Social media, YouTube, seems like it all started that way. But I think I can really get a chance to articulate some of the real utility that these tokens or the tokenization of these products or assets or whatever you want to call them can really change the game in terms of, well, the future adoption of, well, different enterprises in the future. So let's get into it. So first, what are NFTs? Like I said, a lot of people seem to think that these are cute cat pictures on the internet. But in reality, these are just unique digital objects that reside on the decentralized ledger that allow to show for ownership rights of the items that they may consist of. And I have a couple examples here showing, they can represent titles, whether it's the title of a car or a home. They can be the representation of digital content, whether it's audio, visual, pictures, like I said, cat pictures. They can also show digital rights like intellectual property rights, copyright, patents, all these different unique things. Hell, they can even show IDs, tickets, really showing ways that you can tokenize other items to really signify a mechanism to use on these decentralized networks. And last, I also have NFT licenses, including SaaS softwares and smart contracts. And also, I'll get into the future, well, what I call smart equities. Smart contract equities. But let's dive even more into it too, because I think I have a lot more to say about NFTs also. So not only can they show property rights, but they also can have different utilities about them. I have a few up here showing like an NFT pass token, maybe be able to tokenize different, whether it's a password or a key, or even as an ID, as I stated before. Or maybe you want to have a token to represent an item through a supply chain, to be able to really have a better native way to track these items through whatever sort of business enterprise you may have. I also have these NFTs can really show the representation of a retail sale by being able to have a person natively buy whatever they're trying to buy, through a retail shop, as an NFT to show the ownership of the thing they just purchased, on top of being able to show the integrity of the item, showing that it actually came from the provider that you're buying it from, even if it's from a secondhand user. There's a lot of counterfeit things out there. You want to make sure that you have the official item that you're actually trying to buy and not a counterfeit. But what more can we go into this? Well, when it comes to the XRP ledger and digital economies, NFTs, I think we can really show what these ecosystems could look like. And I have a diagram up here showing you kind of the 3 different segments of tokenization. One being currencies, and those would consist of not only fiat currencies, but also cryptocurrencies. Second, I have assets, which not only illustrate traditional financial assets, but also potential future crypto assets. Like I said, crypto equities. And then again, I have NFT products, which can really be a representation of anything, but it's just a native mechanism of being able to show what an item is on these decentralized networks to be able to exchange these different items. Now, one example I used to give for how these ecosystems can coexist with each other and sort of, I guess you could say, interact, is let's say you had an online store, right? And normally when you have an online store, you have your products, you have your payment mechanism, and you may have an automation to how you're able to show these products, sell these products, and so on. So how can we have a digital store on a decentralized network that can not only illustrate NFTs, have a native payment mechanism, but also really be backed by a series of digital assets that we haven't really seen before? So let's take a decentralized eBay, for example, right? Now, in a traditional sense, whenever you list something online on eBay, for instance, that data that you're listing is standing in a couple databases. And you may have your application that may actually showcase the app eBay in that scenario. And when it comes to actually being able to exchange goods, there's a lot of siloed data to be able to allow for that exchange. And an example of that is somebody made a purchase for something. Well, you can see that someone purchased this and you may issue them a receipt. But then you've also got to go in the back end and tell the database, hey, someone bought this. So you got to delist the thing that they bought, and if there's multiple items, you got to make sure you keep track of that. Well, with decentralized assets, what you can do is the items in your store can be tokenized, the representation of that item that you're listing for sale. Now, you can have your native payment mechanism, currencies, cryptocurrencies, and you can use that native payment mechanism to show the transfer of ownership rights from an item you just bought on the store. So if you have 10 items on the store, you have 10 NFTs representing them. People buy those 10 NFTs, you no longer have those items in the store because the rights that have been associated to the items that they bought have already been purchased. It allows for very easy, I guess you could say easy accounting for being able to manage those. Now, where do digital assets come into this? Well, in order to run your store, you may have a collection of other smart contracts, or maybe you may compile your application or your Dapplication, decentralized application, in such a manner to be able to list these items and for people to buy them. Well, what about this decentralized application you may have is this application will allow for, people to interact with it to be able to buy the goods, but when people are buying the goods, there may be people who own the backend application, whether that be a smart contract or a structured DApp you may have. So one thing you may end up having is the more people that use that store, that use that application, they could actually have shareholders in that application. That shareholder can be represented as an NFT for the broader app that you just build or whatever. And in doing so, you're actually able to have people who may invest in their early creation of the application get paid based off the performance of that app. Now, when it comes to the XRP decentralized, these XRP decentralized economies, we can look at a few things here. So one thing I really like about XRP, the XRPL is you end up getting this maximum liquidity amongst items. So let's go back to the assets, for example. Due to a function called rippling, you can actually have a high level of liquidity between liquid assets to be able to buy, whether it's an item on a store, be able to do very easy exchanges. And it's one of those things where nothing like this has ever been able to exist before, where you can take sort of an abstract value of an item, whether it's stock, a bond, treasury note, milk derivatives, and you can essentially have easy liquidity into currencies to be able to buy certain items on these decentralized stores, whether it's a product or whether it's a representation of a home, like I said before when it comes to the titles, or it can be just something as simple as buying a toothbrush. All it is just a mechanism to be able to have high liquidity into buying those different assets. Now, one thing that I find really interesting about the XRPL is it's also a decentralized exchange. So being able to have that easy access between these different assets becomes incredibly simple because instead of having to build out your own mechanism to be able to exchange these assets, it's sort of cooked in natively into the network. And it's one of those things where I don't think it gets a lot of the attention it deserves because, most people don't really care about exchanges. But at least from my perspective, it's one of the most core, integrable applications that this network is able to provide that can really change the game in terms of how people are able to transact assets on these networks. So let's go into more. Well, Dapps and their token economy. So I gave that example of the online store, but why would someone use your store? Why would someone use your Dapp? And I don't think this gets a lot of attention because people just assume if you just build an application, if I build it, they will come. And as a software developer, I can tell you that's not always the case. You gotta have reasons why people would want to use them. So I kind of broke this down into, as you could say, 3, 4-ish reasons. And that comes down to incentives, risk rewards, and penalties. So let's move on to something a little bit more complex, like a peer-to-peer credit lending, or I could say equity lending, a peer-to-peer lending app, right? Well, you may have incentives for people to be able to lend out money to other participants as an interest rate. Simple enough. People are able to lend out money from one person to another, and they're able to get their reward based off the completion of that payment with the interest rate. Now, there's a risk with that, because obviously, not everyone pays 100% of the time. As you may have noticed, you had your friend borrow $5 and never got it back. So, in terms of building these DApp ecosystems, you need to have essentially penalties to be able to compensate the network for a loss in value. Now, people usually think of penalties as sort of I'm gonna punish you for not doing this, but it's sort of a mixture between a disincentive mechanism and I guess you could say it's a disincentive mechanism on top of a way to compensate the network for the loss of value due to a lack of participation or fault in one of the participants. So, in the example I gave for the peer-to-peer lending app, let's say I lent out $100. And I had a 2% interest rate, so I'm expecting $102 back. but I only got $50 back. Well, one way I can essentially have a disincentive mechanism or a way to compensate the network is maybe I had them put up a $20 deposit. So yeah, they pay me $50, maybe I take the $20 deposit, and I'm sitting there with $70 in terms of value that I'm able to accumulate. Well, in doing that, you're able to have a method in which, in some regard, if something were to fail, some part of that interaction gets compensated. Now, it's not a perfect system, but the idea is if you can have a certain way to compensate users on the network, if any value is lost, you can essentially subside that with, well, like I said, in this scenario, a deposit. And this goes for really any app. When you build something, you want people to have incentives to use it. There's going to be risk rewards in how they use it. And it can be something as simple like the eBay store. You know, the incentive to use it is you can buy something, but the risk is you may not get it. And one thing I